It's taken me a long time to jump on the MOBA bandwagon. I've played them a little bit off and on over the past few years. It usually starts with a conversation with my friends when we're bored as hell in Final Fantasy XIV. Eventually we say, we should hate each other and play League. An hour patches later, and we'll get sucked into the strategic depth of the genre, even if it is for only a month or so until the next trial or raid drops. This time though, I think I'm here to stay, and that's pretty uncharacteristic of me. My favorite game of all time is The Last of Us, and I'm a huge fan of Uncharted, walking simulators, and atmospheric platformers. You know, those games that focus on telling a story or hitting an emotion. Now, don't get me wrong, Doom was one of my games of the year last year, and I'm chewing through Kingdom Hearts 2 right now on critical mode as well. I love all kinds of games, but I'll always be more excited for the next journey or something. The story-driven games are usually focused in their presentation. All they're trying to do is get the player to feel whatever emotion they want to feel. I think the key word here is pacing, and when you give the player the ability to interact with whatever world you built in front of them, you're gonna have a hard time keeping their eyes on the prize. The creators of these games are totally aware of this challenge, it's clear, and there'll also be players of different ages and experiences that'll be playing their game as well. So they'll likely try to boil down the gameplay into the most common denominator. Even The Last of Us, for example, has the most bare-bones crafting system probably ever, just enough to get the player to feel like a scavenging guerrilla fighter. Hell, Gone Home goes even further by only letting the player move, pick up things, and listen.
Lonnie brought her hair dye over today.
They keep the game as simple as possible, just complex enough to hit those emotional beats. Juxtapose that against these games that are only that, games. Let's say you have an idea for a really sweet gameplay mechanic, like Titanfall 2's Momentum. All of a sudden, you have this awesome new way of moving about the maps, so you let yourself dream big whenever you design them. Let's put a huge tower in the center of the map so we can swing around the entire thing. Ooh, how about we create like really long, dangerous lines of sight that urge the player to move quickly down them? Somewhere, you realize that the staggering amount of options you have to approach these scenarios are overwhelming to new players, and it's all just happening so fast. So we'll dial back the vision just a little bit. We'll just keep the maps relatively flat and that 3-lane design that we're so used to in these shooters. Don't put in too many build options and don't go crazy with any new game modes either. Remember, we don't want to overwhelm the player. Cutting away from the fat of these games may make it more accessible, but it only hurts the vision of the product. League of Legends and MOBAs like it throw that entire thought process out of the window. They saw an audience that craves a deep, meaningful multiplayer experience and made sure to deliver on that promise without wavering on that vision one bit. Yes, I know Dota exists, and I'm sure that it's first or whatever the debate is, but League's the one that my friends play, and that's the only one I know, alright? Everybody calm down. In the last video, I briefly touched on how Horizon Zero Dawn lulls you into a false sense of security because of how much information is told to you in the earlier stages of the game. League of Legends does everything possible to avoid creating those habits. The tutorial doesn't teach you your role in the fight, the 130 plus characters make sure your opponent is different, not to mention the build options that each character has. If you found a favorite, too bad, the pool of heroes you can play will change next week. I could spend hours nickel and diming every single element that keeps the players on their toes, but these fears that the other developers have are real. Despite that, how does League of Legends avoid this criticism? I think the genius occurs just as soon as you enter the match. Let's talk about the center of the screen. I'm a huge film nerd, and for some reason I've spent way too much time looking into the specifics on how to frame a shot. If I ever did get into filmmaking, I'd probably like a director of photography or something. And as much as I'd love to sit here and explain the differences between Mad Max and how Drive composed their shots, I'll spare you that. After all, this is a video about League, and I've already spent too long not talking about League. Instead, I'll just say that there's a lot of invisible psychology within every single frame of a film. And I don't think gaming is immune to that psychology. Almost every game has all of the most necessary information at the center of the screen. League of Legends doesn't have that. The default setting is to keep the camera locked on the player even when you're in your Nexus. All of that negative space behind you feels worthless and begs you to get rid of it. What information do you want to see? Is it the minion wave? Is it our player? Or maybe it's the guy over in the other lane that just made the best play in his career? League of Legends is a game about strategy, and it urges you to come up with your own. Asking the player to choose where they want their focal point to be will already get them prepped for the mental gymnastics that they have to make throughout this game. If too much information can create a bad habit, maybe League can create good habits from the lack of it. They ask the player to look for information to learn more about the game. You see, every game has multiple layers of depth within their mechanics, right? For example, I got super deep into shooters when I was in high school. Many people know how to shoot, they know how to look at the minimap to find people, but those of us that spent way too much time in Halo and Call of Duty started to manipulate the spawn timings. We keep track of when power weapons spawns, and even better, we can control where you're gonna spawn next. Fighting games are also pretty notorious for this. I'm not trying to sound pedantic when I mention these things, and it's not like they hide this stuff from the players either, but these games spend so much time teaching the players about basic mechanics that a lot of players will think that they already know everything they need to know. What that creates is a sharp divide between two communities, the pros and the filthy casuals. The only difference is that one got curious enough to do the research. League doesn't give any information whatsoever, so now everybody has to do the research. It's brilliant. By asking everybody to do that research, they tear that wall down between the pros and the casual, mainly dividing them by just mechanical skill. I used to do all kinds of research when I was a kid playing these games, but I've noticed that my attachment to these story-driven games have turned me completely off from that. I've even caught myself saying that I won't do certain things in a game because I felt like that's not how the game is supposed to be played. The reintroduction of League of Legends into my routine has sparked that craving again, and I can't be alone in this. Now, I firmly believe that the more developers let go, the more we can get players to actually understand these games. Once we understand games even more, that balloon of knowledge will just keep expanding. One guy will come up with a cool idea and everybody else will totally understand how and why it works. Then add that into their game and improve on it. League and Dota have created an entirely new genre because of it, and Dark Souls have totally redefined all action RPGs. You see, it's already begun. The Little Things is powered by you all on Patreon. Every Friday, I post a write-up discussing the next topic so we can have a conversation and break this down together. You'll also get an exclusive monthly show and your name in the credits. Next week, we'll be talking about Kingdom Hearts 2, so if you've played it, I hope you consider supporting the show to get your voice heard. And new episodes drop every Wednesday at 11, so make sure you subscribe to catch new ones. Until then, my name is Tyler Gesselman, and as always, it's been a pleasure.